Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats as we move into our next GNF session, which is jointly organized by Airbus and Air Liquide, and it is titled Towards a Sustainable Moon Economy, Vision of Agencies and Industries. Let me remind you that also for this session you can engage in the discussion by submitting and rating questions on the Slido platform, which is very familiar to you by now already. And now for this session, we are very pleased that we have all speakers on site here, so thanks for coming to St. Petersburg. And it is my great pleasure now to hand over and to introduce to you the moderator of this session, Pierre-Alexis Jumel, Director, International and New Business, Space Systems, Airbus Defence and Space. Pierre-Alexis, please.
Thank you, Christian. And thank you to the IAF and Roscosmos for organizing and hosting this GNF. So I will be your moderator today. So together with Bertrand Barat from Air Liquide, we are happy to welcome you to this GNF about towards the sustainable moon economy. So I'm very happy to be here with you, and it's great that all the panelists are also here physically present today to exchange together. So, next slide up. So today we are here to address the exciting topic of building a sustainable moon economy. Indeed, the moon is today the next natural step for human exploration, and this time humanity intends to stay. In addition to space agencies program, we also see many commercial companies developing initiatives on that topic. To that end, utilization of local resources, the development of sustainable energy, or the improvement of life support technologies will be key for this sustainable development. However, only the development of a cislunar economy based on moon resources will achieve a sustainable return and a successful presence on the moon. And the industry is today organizing itself toward this objective. The objective of the discussion today is to provide you with some insight on what is happening on this topic. And I'm very happy now to introduce you our great panelists present today. So I will start with Bertrand Barat, who I already mentioned. Bertrand is the director of the space market for Air Liquide and responsible for defining space strategy in collaboration with the different subsidiaries of the group involved in space, from on-the-ground support to onboard gas and cryogenic technologies. Jörg Kreisel is CEO of GKAC. He is an independent space business advisor with backgrounds in aerospace engineering, new business creation, and finance. Jörg is dealing with space commercialization since 1987 and supports government and industry organizations, as well as selected investors worldwide. Sergei Krikalev is a cosmonaut and accomplished 6 space flights, 3 on board the Soyuz spacecraft and 3 on board the space shuttle, with 803 days of cumulative spaceflight time and 41 hours of EVA in space. So it's a great pleasure to have you on our panel, Mr. Krikalev. Bob Lambaret is a policy officer of the Luxembourg Space Agency, where he works on the Space Resource.lu initiative. He is also the Luxembourg delegate in the program board of human spaceflight, microgravity and exploration, overseeing the European Exploration Envelope program, and currently supports the establishment of ESRIC, the European Space Resources Innovation Center in Luxembourg. And finally, Luigi Scateia is a partner in PwC Advisory France, where he leads the space practice, as well as the core space strategy and policy consulting team based in Paris and Toulouse. He is also in charge of a data analytics unit in Toulouse with specific expertise on satellite data at the base of the PwC Insights from Space offer. Thanks a lot for being there. So let's get started with the first roundtable question. So, we mentioned many current moon exploration initiatives that are happening worldwide, both commercial and institutional. So how do you see the current status of the cislunar economy today, and how it could look like in the next 10 years? Maybe to start, I would ask either Luigi or Jörg to provide feedback. If you want, Jörg, go ahead.
Well, yeah, hello everybody, thank you, that's a good question. So, for the time being, there is no cislunar economy, right? So there is a couple of activities, and to a large extent these are government-driven programs, although we have a couple of smaller private sector companies which have brought commercial customers on board, but that is accounts only for a small fraction of what's currently happening. In principle, I think we need to keep in mind that an economy is based on a balance between demand and supply, isn't it? So right now it's a nascent or not yet even existing economy. However, the future of space, and that accounts for the orbital space as well as for everything beyond in the planetary system or deep space, the entire future will be about space logistics and space infrastructure and associated logistics, excuse me. So the point is, for the next couple of years, and the question is where will we be in 10 years from now, the question is there for the years ahead a public good to be identified? So if we have public goods and government-driven programs, then we may find analogies in terrestrial economies, like for instance in public waste management and similar stuff, where commercial entities provide competitive solutions to public goods on behalf of government needs. And then the question is going to be what is in it for the large system integrators and for small and medium-sized enterprises and other new actors entering the scene. So, all in all, there's generically three types of business in our space economy. It's a government business, there's a government/private sector business, and there's potentially a private sector business. And my personal guess would be that for a number of years we will see only government-dominated programs with a couple of commercial activities popping up. And maybe we have a 50-50 balance in about 10 years from now. It will take quite a while to have this private sector dominated.
Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, I'm just going to build on what Jörg mentioned. Indeed, I mean, we are at the onset of what we can define as the lunar economy, clearly. So we are seeing the first steps towards the creation of a lunar economy. And I echo what he said. I mean, clearly there are a number of, let's say, privileged paths towards the development of such a lunar market and associated lunar economy, and they all go through governmental demand. So the creation of such an economy, of course, relies on demand from governmental missions to the moon, and even missions to Mars, where the moon can act as a stopgap. In the end, the key logic is that doesn't mean that that the sector is not becoming commercial and it's not transitioning towards being more commercial, because in the end we see right now a paradigm shift which is similar to the one that we have already experienced and seen in other space segments like launchers or even Earth observation, where basically the role of the governments, the role of the agencies is moving from being like development agents to being more like procurement agencies. And we see the private sector taking on, let's say, the responsibility of developing the systems and delivering the missions for the governments and the agencies. And that's something that we are seeing right now, with many commercial companies taking steps in these directions. As for the main segments that we see developed in the next 10 years, I echo again what Jörg said. I mean, we can distinguish between transportation or logistics, as he called it, which is basically going to be a big share of the lunar market, with transportation to and from the moon, and from the moon orbit to the moon surface and so on. And then we have other two key segments are data, so the, let's say, the extraction and sale of data around the moon, it's going to be key and very important because it's going to fuel a lot of the activity that will happen on the moon, like for example in situ resources utilization, which is the third key market segment that we see developed around the lunar economy. So the utilization of resources in situ, mainly, for example, like extraction of water to produce oxygen and hydrogen for propellant utilization, for life support systems, and other types of resources for in situ use. So right now, indeed, I would say I'm a little bit more optimistic than Georg, so I wouldn't say that there is no lunar economy. There is some lunar economy on Earth. You know, we see the onset of this lunar economy. And in 10 years now, from now, I mean, we can be at the tip of an exponential growth if all the plans go as intended, if all the government plans go as intended.
Luigi, we'll turn to my right now. So are you also sharing the same view about resource exploitation, demand and supply? Mr. Kekalev, if you...
mean the same question?
Yeah, same question.
Well, I agree that there is no market at this point for lunar and cislunar activity. Main activity will stay on governmental level, and I think in nearest future, although some commercial company will come to this activity, but main customer would be government again.
Yes, thank you for the question. So overall, I think we all agree that we are at the very beginning. There's no real lunar economy at this stage. So it's a very difficult but interesting question because it's very different from what we know in the space in the past of space exploration, where this time we have much more involvement of different players. We have many space agencies that are part of this. Cislunar activities, and we have also many commercial actors that are looking into it and would like to get active. So if we speak about the cislunar economy, I think we need many different players that somehow, if we say economy, we need different players that exchange services and products. So it's very difficult to predict if that will happen within the next 10 years from now, obviously. In the very beginning, obviously, science and space exploration missions driven by large space agencies will be the main drivers to set this up. And then maybe we will slowly see more and more service providers or commercial companies that start offering and selling services to those companies, being it on the logistics, being it they can provide power, they can produce oxygen, they can produce propellant for the rocket. I think a very important element to a cislunar economy is the sharing or the exchange of services and goods. So if we manage to somehow all together to use the same share some services, it will be very interesting. And then I think on the commercial side, the utilization of space resources is a very interesting topic, as it would allow commercial companies to create value on the lunar surface, and by that motivate them to invest in lunar activities.
Okay.
So first of all, I'd like to say a big spasiba to Roscosmos and IAF for the organization of this very nice conference. To give the insight of industry, I'd like to speak about the way we see space transformation. For the last 20 years, basically, space is facing a deep transformation, first pulled by the ever-increasing digitalization of our society, Second, thanks to introduction of a major disruption from SpaceX, which is the rocket reusability, allowing to democratize the access to space. But there is something that did not change over the last 20 years. That's the way we send every kilogram of hardware into space from Earth. Basically, today, to send 1 ton of hardware in space, you still need 9 tons of propellant just to extract from Earth's gravity. So, in other words, it's to say that Earth is maybe not the most efficient place to access to space. And what we see as an industrial, it's a major new disruption around the corner that we could call sustainability in space, thanks to the discovery and the use of space resources on the celestial bodies that could serve the purpose of long-duration transport, serve the purpose of energy production and storage with hydrogen, for example, and serve the purpose of life support. And we could anticipate, if we master it, that this could completely reinvent the way space missions are organized, and certainly to give an unprecedented advantage to the first nations that will master it, by being able to go further in space, to stay longer in space, to extend the lifetime of the spacecraft by allowing the refueling, and certainly to decrease again the total cost of ownership of these space missions. So what we can see is that a cislunar ecosystem is clearly burning. That is driven by USA and China, clearly, with the main key nations following on their own lunar program. But if we wanted to become sustainable and to become a cislunar economy, the idea would be to consolidate 5 main complex value chains. The first one is about cislunar supply chain. This includes rockets, landers, orbiters, rovers, but also a new capability which is refueling in space. The second pillar would be about industrial in situ resources utilization, and this could be a major enabler. The third pillar should be energy production and storage, intermittent energy production and storage. The fourth pillar should be about lunar habitation and circular life support system. And the last one is about healthcare of astronauts to be able to stay longer in space. So as a conclusion of this question, I would say that on an industrial standpoint, there is a unique opportunity of huge team building at international level, provided main nations are convinced by this endeavor, and provided, of course, they want to collaborate. And if this is the case, we could anticipate eventually that within 10 years, there could be a cislunar economy, so-called a cislunar economy, that could be a kind of continuum in between Earth and space, for the benefit of humanity, for the benefit of peace, and for the benefit of Earth industry.
Yes, you're right, Bertrand. Before we move to the next question, I wanted maybe to remind the audience that you can interact with us. So please go to Slido and you can send your question. Thank you for this. So second question, I think it was mentioned by the panelists. So the demand is not yet, or is barely starting. So naturally, the next question is from your respective point of view, so from an industrial or from an agency point of view. How do you contribute or support the development of this cislunar economy? What will be the main driver to make a sustainable development of this new economy in terms of transport, resources, robots, human? Maybe here I will turn first to Bob or Mr. Fikalev from maybe an agency point of view, how you support and could enable the beginning of this cislunar economy.
As I said, I think, as we said, before we do human moon exploration, we probably send robotic missions there. And in order to provide this mission, of course, we need to develop hardware, develop landers, and also to use these landers for automatic mission, to use it in future for human-rated missions. Of course, we need to basically test flight to be sure that reliability is sufficient to send people. And also, my opinion that commercial players will play a role executing order from government at this point, because for science, it's basically more like science that give you knowledge but not money at this point. Because all these questions of transportation is so expensive that even if we mine gold there, probably it would be losing money anyway. So I think the significance of lunar exploration and cislunar exploration at this point is to get new knowledge and move science forward, and actually develop technology that enable us to come to Luna on more or less regular basis.
Okay. Do you want to complement, Bob?
Yes, so in Luxembourg we have a very unique approach to this, to make the cislunar to arrive to a sustainable economy. I think you need commercial activities and use local resources. And that's why several years ago Luxembourg launched the Space Resource .lu initiative, which basically says that Luxembourg aims to contribute to the peaceful exploration and sustainable utilization of space resource for the benefit of humankind. And actually what we try to do with this initiative is to try to set up an ecosystem in Luxembourg or in Europe where commercial players can be part of these activities and can have their own interest. So in this, for example, to give a few examples, under this initiative, we passed the law on the utilization of space resources. We set up a public-private fund that can invest in those startups and those ideas to develop the technologies and create the future market. We're fully aware that at the moment there is no market, and it will be for many years to come driven by science and by the large space agency. Nevertheless, I think we need to prepare these technologies. We need to create the environment to allow companies to be active in space and also participate and become a truly dynamic place on the lunar surface.
Maybe let's go on the left of the panel. So maybe on your view, how you see a stimulation of the demand and which driver you see to enable the economy.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, how those agencies and industry can contribute and what are the drivers. I think in this community we tend to jump on technical discussions on how to deal with this. You know, the different types of like transports and logistics, robotics, and those types of things. However, the discussion and the framework needed where both industry and agencies can contribute is less technical. It's more about legal regulatory framework, finance, insurance, and actually goods. And what are those goods? In principle, actually what it needs for this lunar economy is a marketplace. And a marketplace of what? A marketplace of space commodities. And what are space commodities? Space commodities are either raw materials, in-space services, contractual rights, and financial rights. So along those four pillars, the framework needs to be established, because otherwise there wouldn't be any economy in the future. So, and our observation is that the current discussions kind of partly neglect these mandatory topics to be addressed. So just to go back to this, so the raw materials, so space commodities and building a marketplace for space commodities. And I thought that's going to be the holy grail for establishing a lunar economy.
I'll carry on. Yeah, just to add on what Jörg said, I mean, in the end, I think the key driver to to support the development of a lunar economy is ensure continuity and stability on the political agendas. I mean, we know that the demand is going to be institutional for a long time to come. So we need this. We need all the government plans to stay where they are, to stay the course, and to keep pushing, without changes of political agenda or without slowdowns, in order for the the lunar economy to really build up. So this is the first key thing I would say. On a related note, I mean, since, as we said, the demand is institutional, but the supply is becoming more purely commercial, so agencies are becoming more procurement agencies and less development agencies as before. This trend needs to continue, so there is a need to explore even different ways, different partnership and procurement methods in order to encourage risk-taking by the industry, and making sure that this trend towards commercialization on the supply side continues, because we don't want to see anymore like large cost-plus programs where the industry is just the contractor. We want to see the industry being the supplier of a service that is going to the moon and doing something there, basically, with the government just contracting that. I think I disagree slightly with Jörg on the need to have regulations in place before the economy can develop. I mean, that's certainly needed at one point. But I think in the end, there are already some regulatory frameworks that allow commercial activity based on, for example, resources extracted on the moon. And possibly, I mean, as the lunar economy develops, international frameworks will probably follow suit and adapt and evolve and pick up. And then all those additional elements reassuring like a larger part of the market to get into it will definitely be needed, as Jörg said, but maybe not immediately and right away. So I guess I would say, in my view, I mean, what's really needed is really sustained demand at the moment.
QFG. Bertrand, any thought about it?
Sure. So to answer your question, Pierre-Alexis, let me take advantage to explain what we are doing on Earth. So Air Liquide is a worldwide leader of gases and cryogenics for industry and health. So we are clearly a terrestrial company. And our main strategic pillars are to, let's say, contribute to energy transition, notably through the rise of a low-carbon hydrogen society, to contribute to healthcare, and to contribute to the digitalization of our society. So as you understood, the core competency of Air Liquide is to master gas and cryogenics on the entire value chain, from either production or extraction from the natural resources up to the application of our customers. And it's right that as part of the application of our customers, we have space, so the market I'm in charge of, in which we stepped into about 50 years ago, mainly through the Ariane program, on which we've been in charge of designing and manufacturing all the cryogenic tanks, propellant management devices, and also, of course, the provision of propellant itself in Kourou. Then we had a chance to develop a cryogenic system for orbital platforms, such as Herschel, such as Planck, such as today some Earth observation satellites on which you need active cooling capability. So we are doing this kind of things, this kind of technology. But I must admit that today's space is clearly singular activity in our society. To give you a figure, space is employing about 300 people, over 67,000 employees. So that's not a big voice. Still, I can tell you that it's heard at the highest level of the company, because everybody understood that space for industry is a way to push back the limits of technology that are always benefiting Earth application. And I would like to share two examples of a very intelligent spin-off that we had through the Ariane development that we did. we developed a very deep understanding of the propellant behavior in microgravity, especially liquid hydrogen. And I can tell you that this hydrogen expertise has been irrigating the group on every deep tech experiment in which we are involved, such as Big Science for ITER or for CERN. And today, clearly, we are involved in clean mobility using hydrogen for trucks, for cars, and tomorrow, why not civil aviation? The second example is about a spin-off of a turbo machine that we've developed on the ISS to refrigerate a biological sample. And today, this technology has allowed to develop a very compact and reliable turbo machine used on LNG tanker, LNG boats, to reliquefy the methane boil-off of the boat and to avoid GHG emission. So that's another example of contribution to the energy transition. So with regard to our ambition or willingness to contribute to this new era of sustainable space exploration, I would say that this time it's to propose to leverage on Earth technology that could be spinned in. And if I get back to the 5 pillars I was speaking about, if we look about the cislunar reliable supply chain system, we would be interested in contributing to the new challenge of gas and cryogenic refueling, leveraging on expertise like propellant mastery, propellant behavior in microgravity, but also gas transfer, gas compression, zero boil-off system. This could start by refueling of satellite with xenon, krypton sent from Earth, and in the future, this could be refueling of cryogenics produced on the celestial bodies. Then on the energy pillar, the idea would be to leverage on the hydrogen expertise we've developed on Earth to develop, for example, a regenerative fuel cell system to help surviving the lunar night. So on Earth, we call that power-to-gas plants. Basically, in country where you have renewable energy in excess, we use that renewable energy to electrolyze water, to store hydrogen in large quantity, to liquefy that hydrogen, and then we use that hydrogen back to the society, either through fuel cell in the electricity grid, or eventually for clean mobility. So this concept eventually could be useful for the moon. And two last things regarding ISRU. Clearly, the industrial gases production capability and operation experience could serve for gas purification, gas liquefaction, gas transfer, to process and store any kind of gas molecules such as oxygen, hydrogen. If we look at Mars atmosphere, CO2 capture to produce methane, eventually to combine that with water, etc., etc. And the last thing is about life support techniques. For life support, you will need very extensive technology on gas purification, like cryogenic distillation, adsorption, membrane, and on this we could eventually propose to spin in some of them. So as a conclusion to that question, I would say that we have here an opportunity to create synergies in between Earth and space technologies. And this could clearly serve the improvement of efficiency, reliability, but also decrease of the cost of this technology for more sustainability on Earth and in space.
Thank you, Bertrand. Maybe to go in more deeper in that direction, and maybe I will ask you, Bertrand, to start because you didn't have a chance to start before. How agencies and industries can collaborate to accelerate the development of this ecosystem and build this moon economy? You were mentioning at the beginning the need of having initiative from industry to push this kind of topic. Maybe what do you think in that direction? And also, as you just explained, maybe your core business is not linked to space. So as a non-traditional space actor, how do you see role of non-traditional industry in the development of this moon economy?
Thanks, Pierre-Alexis. So to answer that question, I would remind that for us, sustainability in space and cislunar economy is a universal challenge that can only succeed through the implementation of very large, complex value chains. that do not fit in the business model of any company of the world, but that do fit in the business model of, let's say, complementary teams of companies. So clearly, to succeed, we will need, I think the big word is collaboration in between nations, collaboration in between institutions, space and non-space, and collaboration between industry, space and non-space industry. And this is clearly something to break, because today I think collaboration is not the biggest thing in the world. So I would give some suggestion to foster it. So first one, we will need the help of institutions to build up a long-term vision for industry to be able to invest in that endeavor. A long-term vision, it means a vision up to 2040, for example. I think that International Space Exploration Group did a wonderful job, so maybe the next step is to bring it up to the G20 or at UN level, to raise awareness of the governments on this endeavor for humanity, and eventually to endorse a 2040 vision that would foster international cooperation and that would help industry to invest in competencies, but also in techno development. The second suggestion I would give is about techno maturation. Usually we mature the space techno brick per brick, but this time we have to think end-to-end value chains. And this would foster consortia of industry to work on global development plans, synchronize those development plans, and to think interoperability from the beginning. That would accelerate a lot the development of this industry. The third suggestion I would make would be to break the silos, or to promote breaking the silos. The silos in between space and non-space institutions, just to leverage synergy in between the fundings, and break the silos in between space and non-space industry to leverage much more on Earth technology that are already mature and robust, and this would be a gain on time and cost. The fourth suggestion would be about creating the marketplace, as you were saying, Jürgen. It's about promoting public-private partnership in between institutions and this industrial consortium to propose some new services. And the fifth suggestion would be about executing and demonstrating as soon as possible by proposing some subscale demonstration at low cost, low maturity, to take low risk and to take benefit of opportunity mission. And I would, let's say, finish by a last one, which is to keep a pioneering spirit and never forget why we are doing that, and we are doing that to better protect our planet and not to find another one.
Indeed, thank you, Bertrand. We will turn now to the left. So, Luigi, if you've got any thought about the role of non-traditional, what you see in on the market, and how agencies and industry could collaborate in this. On this.
I mean, it's difficult to follow up to the extremely detailed answer from Bertrand. I think he covered a lot of points very, very effectively, particularly something I also mentioned earlier. He just said it better. So in the end, I think, again, I'm going to repeat myself, but I agree with him that the key point is to ensure a sustainable vision. So this is really, really important. I mean, it's important to make sure that this renewed interest for going back to the moon and bringing humans to the moon withstands, political waves and withstands policy changes and societal interest waves. So maybe from this perspective, just to add to what Bertrand has mentioned quite exhaustively, I think one point that needs maybe to be stressed is also do proper communication and raise awareness at all levels in society, because in many cases the role of space for the broader economy and for societal benefits is quite misunderstood. So you frequently hear people saying, why are we spending money to do this? Why are we going to the moon when we have a lot of issues here and so on? So it's continuously important to educate decision makers at all levels and also the public of why we want to go to space, why we do all of this, by remarking all the benefits that this brings to society at large. In terms of involving the non-space sector, I mean, in the end, space has a strong inspirational value, so it's a hollow sector, so everybody wants somehow to be sort of connected with that because it's synonymous with high tech and so on. So I guess this is why, in your case, Bertrand, even with just 300 people, you have a big voice in a group of 60,000+. Because space indeed is cool and it's high tech. So for many companies, there is a clear interest from many companies from multiple sectors like automotive, energy, mining, and so on, and even financial services. There is a clear interest in some ways to be involved in space, and we see already some several steps in these directions with companies trying to do technology developments in partnership with space agencies to do spin-ins, to bring in their own technology into space, or trying to receive spin-offs from the agency. We see space marketing happening quite substantially. I think this morning this afternoon there was the iSpace presentation showing several marketing campaigns that have involved their mission. And so in the end, this is starting, and in order to continue, there is a need to keep the dialogue going and to keep the sector interesting, so to keep the conversation active and the momentum active. Again, keeping always this, space exploration plans high in the political agenda. So I second what Bertrand was saying on the fact that this needs to go out of individual agencies and regional agencies' agendas and become more of indeed a G20 topic and so on. I think this is it for me. Maybe I'll leave it over to Jörg.
Well, yeah, I think these are all very valuable comments. And just to clarify on the discussion we had on the previous question, also in support of answering these questions, how one could collaborate between the public sector and the private sector, and also in particular with non-space players. So first of all, yes, all this will evolve. It doesn't really mean that frameworks and solutions have to be in place right now. It will be driven by both sides of what's on the agenda. However, on the long run, we will probably need certain sort of incentive schemes, and it was mentioned also to consider PPPs for particular things with regards to this lunar economy. I would strongly support this, but I have a couple of remarks on that. And another thing is that certainly everything which has to happen there on the moon will involve budgets way beyond what is currently being employed as capital and finance. Okay, so that will surpass any government budgets, etc., etc. It was mentioned to involve the public, to create awareness, etc., to unlock funds from all over the planet. And so it's very clear that we need to have some sort of incentive schemes. And actually, on the long run, looking at latest technology for the last couple of years, it's very clear that fintech is going to become a catalyst for this. So fintech entities will become a catalyst, and it's, in order to employ capital for such new activities, it will take new means of asset valuation. So, and as we had in the old days when satellites weren't bankable in the beginning, right, before space finance evolved, it's a sort of an analogy which we will be facing when exploiting the moon commercially. And so asset valuation will, to a large extent, determine what's going to be financed. But the means of such asset valuations are not yet clear. And also this will evolve over time. And the valuation will be about the assets per se, but also about space convenience. So that means there will be some interagency and other coordination necessary to do that. And the space treaties and commercialization practices, let me put it that way, they will have a big impact on what's going to be financed. Last comment on the PPPs, public-private partnerships. That's probably a sort of a subset of things to look at in different ways. But keep in mind one thing. PPPs at large have never met expectations in terms of revenues. There's not a single PPP that outperformed. You name things like the Channel Tunnel, the Metro of Mexico, Paris Nord TGV, Detroit, Denver International Airport, all these kind of PPP things. So in space with Ariane Group, with Ariane, and the first kind of commercial PPP in space was Rapid Eye, right? And later on Infoterra. So they have brought up interesting companies or interesting business models, but the revenue level which was reached was between 20 and 50% of what was envisaged, right? So, and that applies for PPPs across the board around the world. Nevertheless, the structure in principle of a PPP is good. It will take a very careful consideration of the give and take between the governments and the private sector, right? So in conclusion, asset valuation will be a trigger to unlock the money needed to do what's necessary to be funded.
Thank you, Jörg. Any view of Mr. Cricadet? How industry and agency can collaborate together to develop this economy? From your point of view, how do you see a contribution on developing this cislunar economy from agency and commercial and industrial together?
I think, from my point of view, of course, part of job is already done by a commercial company, and more we do, the bigger pieces of equipment or bigger task would be done by a commercial company, and of course, as I said, from my opinion, the market exists, but this market, final customer for this market would be government and fundamental science. I think when we need to do some practical steps, of course, the steps would be done by some commercial company, but they will do this job for government. And I think this is a way to do cooperation. We done exactly the same when we develop satellites first and then human space flight. So it's basically the same. Initially, small pieces of equipment was done by a commercial company from very beginning, and now we see that not only vehicle, but all missions are done by a commercial company. So basically the same, I expect at least, that the same path we will go with next step of exploration beyond low Earth orbit, close to Moon or on Moon surface.
Okay, thank you. Bob, maybe last word on this collaboration between agency and industry? Thank you.
So let me try to add a few ideas to what has been said already. In general, space agencies, they play a very important role in the years to come, and they can accelerate this by developing concrete ambitious plan, like for example the International Lunar Research Station or the Artemis program, so which somehow brings together all the player in a concrete program. Then I think the agencies can improve on the way they procure those technologies or services. So they can, for example, a good example is the GLEX program on the US side, or the commercial services on the European level. For example, where the European Space Agency is developing a constellation of satellites to provide communication and navigation services to the future lunar economy. And I think it's also by including those services and elements in their architecture, and by actually being, to some extent, an anchor customer for those services, where they can help the industry to be innovative and develop new technologies. And then I think in general the agencies should also listen more to commercial ideas and help industry develop new technologies and innovate and develop new products, and not only procure the services and technology that are needed for their missions. I think they have. We will all gain by trying to innovate in a much broader way. And then I think it's very important to involve, to look beyond the traditional space industry for several reasons. One obvious reasons was already mentioned is the financial side. I think if we want to achieve all of these ideas, we need a lot of funds. So that's where, if we also from a Luxembourgish point of view, if we want to involve more commercial players, but we also need to their part as well. So they also need to invest in this. Everybody at his level. And yeah, that's all for me.
Thank you, everyone. So now we are right on time. We still have 10 minutes to conclude. So I just would like to go back to the slide about Slido. So if you have any questions, it's the time to ask. I will take some questions from the audience. We received a question directly at the beginning of our discussion, because we are talking about sustainability, sustainable presence, and so on. So how would you define sustainable and sustainability? So any idea, any thought on the definition of what you think is sustainability? That's the first question from the audience, yes. I know, Jörg, if you would.
Okay. Yeah. On the first question, with regards to the technology readiness levels, so yeah, having been involved in a lot of these tech assessments and stuff, and even funding some of the companies, I think it doesn't really matter whether you go to the moon or otherwise, other place in space, right? So you prepare the way to mature the technology. So I think it is up to the various governments being involved, but in principle, I wouldn't see a lot of difference compared to other space missions. You just mature the technology readiness, and then you move ahead in the TRL levels, right? So I personally don't see a big difference there for the moon.
I think I'll take the other one. So the definition of sustainable. So what we mean by sustainable,
yeah,
we mean.
But the definition of sustainability, yes.
Yeah, we mean commercially sustainable. So we're not talking about environmental sustainability in this case, but we mean creating the right environment for commercial companies that invest and develop some particular technologies to be able to continue selling their products or services and survive across the decades. So that's what we meant with sustainable. And then there's another one on space tourism on the moon.
No, maybe if there are any thoughts about the sustainability, I don't know. Otherwise, we move on. Bertrand, you want?
Maybe the definition of sustainability in space is not the same as sustainability on Earth. I would say sustainability in space would be Earth independent and economically viable. And if we say economically viable, it means having a vision, so a long-term vision, allowing industry to project themselves in a supply and demand approach and to invest.
Yeah, I fully agree. I say sustainable economy is an economy that does not entirely depends on public funds. And I think that's where it becomes interesting, that we need to find the reason or the purpose and create value in space and make this a sustainable effort, because even if all the countries together, they will not forever purely fund these activities from their public budgets.
Okay. I'll pick another one. I think it was linked to what you say, Jörg, about the lack of legal framework and the lack of law around resource exploration and so on. Is it really this lack that is blocking the development, or is it more like political wish to go in that direction? What do you think is blocking here?
I'm not saying that it is one thing requires the other. So all this goes together. So I think usually these sort of new activities, which then need dedicated solutions of different frameworks, they evolve, and the best thing is that they evolve based on an initial example. And for the time being, there's a lot of confusion here because there's different camps, right? There's people dealing with the treaties and the legal regulatory framework. There's other people who drive the tech. There's people who deal with the commerce. There's other people who even look into, even financial players who look into the funding. But what I'm trying to say is all this, there is no foundation for all these to go together yet. And it will evolve on one or two initial examples, and then we will take it from there. And most probably, looking at the dynamics over the last couple of years, there will be probably dominating players from the private sector pushing the boundaries here. Because not sure whether the governments are yet up to the task to put this in context. So, and there's also the question of timeliness. The commerce wouldn't wait for things to happen, because then there wouldn't be any commerce, right? So I think that is something which we will see over probably the next 12 months to evolve here and there. We see stuff popping up, and that will then fuel new discussions.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Bob, from your point of view, I think Luxembourg is leading also in Europe with the resource exploitation. So do you see that something that is missing, that is blocking, or how do you see the resource exploration?
Do you have on the framework?
Legal framework or law? Doing that?
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely missing an international framework for the utilization of space resources. So Luxembourg is very much encouraging supporting the dialogue on different international forums to reach a common understanding of what we want to do, what we accept to be in line with our principles. So Luxembourg published the Space Resources Law 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. That does not mean that we not want. I think our ultimate goal is clearly to have this international framework, and it is missing. And our law must be seen more in a step-by-step approach to somehow trigger the process. And we are very active at UN level to support the dialogue.
Okay, thanks. Any other thought? Yeah.
Maybe an additional comment on that. I think, yes, I fully agree. What is something to also look at is the volatility of these values. So the moment values are very volatile, it's hard to quantify them in a way that they get bankable or financeable. So, but that's particular for the ISRU prospects. Some players are more advanced, and I think that's pretty good. So companies who deal with natural resources as a core business have a major advantage because they used to do this, right? So, but we see a couple of these kind of new propositions where ISRU activities are being promoted, where it's not quite clear what the basis of the values is. And that goes back to my previous comments, and I'm not sure, I hope it became sort of clear that the asset valuation in different ways needs to be streamlined, let's put it that way. Yeah.
Thanks. Maybe last question, or you want? Okay.
Maybe I'd like to add something on the framework, not on the legal framework, but on the industrial framework. I just want to pay attention on the, let's say, importance to think interoperability right now. And I just want to share an experience we have on Earth about the rise of low-carbon hydrogen society. So you see that now everybody is speaking about hydrogen. Everybody wants to move to hydrogen, clean mobility of hydrogen. Still, all the technology exists for a long time. But what's missing today for the exact rise of this hydrogen society, it's interoperability to allow a large scaling of hydrogen society. So that's why, let's try to save 20 years by speaking about interoperability right now, and that could be done at the same time of a legal international framework.
Thank you. I think that was then the last question. So I wanted maybe to thank all the panelists for being there, for the audience being here in St. Petersburg, and also the virtual participants. So thank you again to the IAF and to Roscosmos for organizing that. Maybe last word, Christian? Or
Yeah, I can just make some.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Pierre-Alexis, and thanks to all the speakers for this very interesting panel. We are now getting into a slightly shortened coffee break, and the program will resume again at 16:30 in the technical sessions, and here as well with a very interesting GNF organized by NASA that will see 3 NASA-associated administrators. On the topic of Explore as One. Please be back a few minutes before 16:30. Thank you very much.